This tiny country is the only carbon-negative country in the world. Bhutan, a somewhat mysterious country, was isolated entirely from the world until 1974, when media was allowed to cover the new king's coronation. How did this tiny country, which was isolated from the world for a very long time, have now become the leader in sustainability? In this video, we'll explain how Bhutan became carbon negative by doing things differently from other big countries. We'll also talk about why it's hard for other countries to achieve the same result. How did a tiny country that no one has heard of beat global powers such as the USA and China? To find out, I spent the last few weeks reading sustainability reports, scientific reviews, and after 20 pages of notes later, I compiled all of that into this single script, and this video will walk you through them all. The first question that comes to mind is, why did Bhutan even choose to become carbon negative in the first place? It all started in 1972, when Bhutan's King Jigme Singye Wangchuck said that happiness is more important than just making money. He introduced something called gross national happiness, GNH, which is a special way of measuring how well the country is doing. Instead of just looking at money, Bhutan's GNH looks at 9 important areas, such as how happy people feel, their health, education, how they use their time, and how well they take care of the environment. Bhutan's Prime Minister, Dr. Lotay Tshering, explained that GNH is about being content and happy with what you have, being kind to others, and creating a community where people share and care for each other. But this happy country that seemed perfect was soon going to face a major problem. On October 7, 1994, a huge flood happened in Phochu and Punat Sangchu regions, Bhutan, when a lake high up in the mountains suddenly burst. This phenomena is also called glacial lake outburst flood, or GLOF in short, is a powerful and sudden flood that happens when a lake formed by melting glaciers breaks through its natural barrier. This caused a lot of damage, with water rushing down rivers and destroying homes and land. It was a scary reminder of how powerful these mountain lakes can be. Again, on July 8, 2015, another mountain lake, Lemthang Cho GLOF in Bhutan, burst after a 5.1 magnitude earthquake. The flood wasn't as big, but it still caused damage, taking the lives of 4 horses, washing away bridges, and damaging land. In Bhutan, there are many lakes like these, and some are very dangerous. Experts are keeping a close watch on them because the risk of these floods is getting higher due to climate change and earthquakes. It's really important to have good plans in place to manage these risks and keep people safe. Fast forward to the present, Bhutan is facing a big problem right now. High up in the Himalayas, there are 4 lakes, Bechung, Rafstreng, Thotomi, and Lugat Cho, that are getting more dangerous as they fill with water from melting glaciers. If these lakes burst, they could cause massive floods that would destroy homes, farmland, and roads. Bhutan depends on things like farming, forests, and hydropower, which are all affected by the changing climate. Climate change is like the Earth getting a fever because there are too many gases, like carbon dioxide, trapping heat in our atmosphere. Normally, the Earth has a natural way of keeping its temperature just right, but things like cars, factories, and cutting down trees add extra gases that make it warmer than it should be. This can cause all sorts of problems, like melting ice at the poles, making the sea levels rise, and changing the weather, which can lead to really hot days, big storms, or long droughts. In Bhutan's case, as the glaciers melt faster due to rising temperatures, the risk of these floods is getting higher. They understand how serious global warming and climate change are, so they knew they needed to find a solution to protect their people from these threats. Now we understand why Bhutan needs to fight climate change and the consequences they will face if they don't. But how did they manage to become the first carbon-negative country in the world? What did they do that was different from the rest of the world? Back in 2009, Bhutan made a big promise at a United Nations meeting to always stay carbon neutral, meaning they would not add more carbon to the atmosphere than they can remove. They repeated this promise in 2016. One of the ways Bhutan keeps this promise is by protecting their environment. Bhutan's constitution says that at least 60% of the country must always be covered by forests, and they have succeeded. More than 51% of Bhutan is protected, making it the largest percentage in Asia. These protected areas are home to many animals, including endangered species like Bengal tigers, snow leopards, and black cranes. In 2015, Bhutan's trees and plants absorbed more carbon dioxide than the country produced, making Bhutan one of the greenest countries in the world. Because of this, ecotourism has become a big and growing industry in Bhutan. Bhutan has a lot of potential to make electricity from water, which is called hydropower. They could make up to 30,000 megawatts of power, but they are currently only using about 2,300 megawatts. It's like having a giant battery, but only using a small part of it to turn on a few lights. They also make about 11,000 gigawatt hours of electricity each year from hydropower and sell most of it to India, which helps make money for the country. By doing this, Bhutan also helps reduce pollution by cutting down on 22.4 million tons of CO2 emissions. This is like filling over 224 large sports stadiums with coal. Apart from carbon sequestration and hydropower, the government provides free electricity to rural farmers to reduce the use of firewood and promotes the use of electric vehicles by subsidizing purchases, partnering with Nissan to integrate electric cars into the national fleet. Additionally, Bhutan supports the use of energy-efficient LED lighting and engages in widespread tree planting efforts, like the Million Trees Initiative, which aims to plant 1 million trees to support rural livelihoods and restore degraded lands. These trees help by absorbing carbon dioxide, preventing erosion, and reducing flooding. On June 2, 2015, a team of 100 volunteers in Bhutan set a new world record by planting 49,672 trees in 1 hour, significantly surpassing the previous record by almost 10,000 trees. These collective actions contribute significantly to Bhutan's achievements in sustainability and environmental conservation. With all of these efforts, they achieved their country to be carbon negative. If it took Bhutan only 40 years to become carbon negative, how come no other nation has been able to do it, or is even close? Let us take a look at the USA and see what would happen if they tried to do the same. To match Bhutan's model and increase the US forest cover to 60%, a substantial expansion of forested areas would be required. Currently, about 33% of the US land is forested. In order to offset all the CO2 from 1 year of emissions with just trees, we'd need to plant approximately 267 billion trees that would need to be planted and grown to maturity. More than 30 million hectares of trees. That's like creating a forest that's nearly twice the size of France, or an area that is a bit bigger than Alaska. While this is not impossible, it is definitely a big challenge. A group of 13 scientists looked at 605 tree nurseries in 20 northern states. They found that only 56 of these nurseries, which is less than 10%, grow enough trees to help with big planting projects like restoring forests. Also, these nurseries don't have a wide variety of tree species that are needed for these projects. This means that to carry out large plans for planting trees and making forests healthier, we need more nurseries to grow lots of trees and different kinds of trees. To plant the amount of trees to offset the yearly emissions, at this stage USA does not have the capacity to do it. But how about offsetting the carbon footprint by using only renewable energy, just like Bhutan? In 2023, the US generated a huge amount of electricity, about 4.18 trillion kilowatt hours. If we only used that electricity to power homes, it could keep every house in the US running for more than 30 years straight. Most of this electricity, 60%, came from burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas, which isn't great for the environment. Only about 21% came from renewable energy sources like wind and solar power. So in order to increase the renewable energy sources, we'll need to add a lot more wind turbines and solar panels, enough to cover about 1/10 of the entire country's land. Imagine covering an entire country like Argentina with solar panels and wind turbines. That's the scale of land needed. But you must be wondering, how about hydropower? Just like in the case of Bhutan. However, not all hydropower plants are the same. Some of these plants are like big sponges that absorb more carbon dioxide, a gas that warms the planet, than they release, which is great for the environment. But some hydropower plants, especially those with large reservoirs, can produce methane. This happens when organic materials like plants and trees submerged underwater decompose without oxygen, releasing methane, a potent greenhouse gas. In fact, out of about 1,500 hydropower plants studied around the world, more than 100 of them are worse for the environment than fossil fuels because they release a lot of greenhouse gases. So while hydropower can help, it's important to choose and manage these plants carefully to make sure they are truly helping the planet. To power the whole United States just with hydropower, we would need a huge amount, about 4,000 gigawatts of energy. That's much more than we can get from hydropower right now. There is one major factor why other countries cannot compete with Bhutan. Bhutan is a small country with fewer than 1 million people, and it's still considered a developing nation. Even though it's not as big or rich as countries like the USA has a population of 333 million people, which means more people means more demand for goods and services, such as food, clothing, and electronics. Producing and transporting these goods often involves burning fossil fuels, which increases carbon emissions. So, it just means that with a higher population, it will be more difficult to offset the carbon emissions. Bhutan becoming carbon negative in 40 years is really impressive, but trying to do something similar in a big country like the USA is super tough. To remove the same amount of carbon dioxide as Bhutan does, the USA would need to plant so many trees that it would cover an area bigger than the state of Alaska. Plus, setting up enough windmills and solar panels would take up as much land as a whole country, like Argentina. Not all ways of making power from water, hydropower, are good for the planet either, because some can create a harmful gas called methane. The USA has a lot more people and factories that need energy, which makes it even harder to stop using all fossil fuels. This shows that big countries have a tougher time making big changes like Bhutan did, and they need plans that fit their own situation better. Even though Bhutan is the first country to remove more carbon from the air than it adds, it might still face big problems because of climate change.
Scientists and experts have studied our glaciers for decades, and their report kept me awake at night, agonizing about the bad news and what it meant for my country and my people.
Bhutan is a small country and doesn't have a lot of money, so it could be really hard for them to fix things if big floods or storms happen. On the other hand, big countries like the United States have added a lot of carbon to the air, about 25% of all the carbon ever added by people everywhere. But because the USA is such a big and rich country, it's better able to handle and fix problems caused by climate change. This situation shows something a little sad, but also hopeful. The smaller countries that don't cause much pollution are the ones that get hurt the most by climate change. But Bhutan shows us that even small countries can do big things for our planet. This gives us hope that if everyone works together, we can all help fix the planet, just like Bhutan is trying to do. If you like learning about this, don't forget to hit the like button on this video and tell me in the comments what else you want to learn about. Your ideas help us choose what to talk about next. Until then, keep exploring.